I'll get straight to the point. My middle son, Jasper, is a senior in college. He's a decent lad most of the time, but I'm a bit annoyed with him right now. He just asked me for money for a spring break trip to Hawaii with his mates, which caught me off guard. As I said, he's a good lad, and I want him to have fun, but something about how he asked didn't sit right with me. His mother, Clara, has been struggling with her mental health lately, and it would have meant a lot to her to have him around. But I suppose he's more caught up with partying on a beach with his fraternity brothers. I can't entirely fault him for it. I was much the same at his age, and I see a lot of myself in him. This whole thing got me reminiscing about my own college days and reminded me of something I hadn't thought about in ages, which is the story I'm about to share. Oddly enough, Jasper introduced me to this platform, so maybe he'll find it amusing if this gets read. I attended Wharton, class of 1985, something I'm still quite proud of. It was, and still is, the most prestigious business school in the world, and I took that reputation seriously. I had my fun, but I also worked hard. It was a different era back then. Many of my classmates were wild, like something out of The Wolf of Wall Street, and I did my best to steer clear of that lifestyle. In my junior year, though, I did something a bit spontaneous. I was dating a Puerto Rican girl named Sofia Ramirez, whom I remember fondly. Sometimes I wonder how my life might have been different if I'd pursued things further with her instead of returning home for spring break as usual. Sofia convinced me to visit Puerto Rico to meet her extended family. It was my first time on the island, and I was eager to make a good impression, so I agreed without hesitation. That said, I was a nervous wreck. I didn't want to mess anything up, and Sofia often teased about how open Puerto Rican families were, so I knew they already knew plenty about me. My anxiety turned out to be mostly unfounded, as I got along well with everyone upon meeting them, and they seemed to like me. Most of the trip was about meeting her relatives, but we did have time for a few outings of our own. After all, it was spring break. One of those outings was a hike through El Yunque, which, fun fact, is the only tropical rainforest in the Use National Forest system. Neither of us had a car, so Sofia's mother drove us and dropped us off at one of the most popular trailheads. Being a bit mischievous, we definitely took advantage of not having to drive. The plan was to hike, enjoy the scenery, and sneak a bit of rum and weed. Everything was shaping up to be perfect, but we soon realized there was a major issue. The trail we were most excited about was closed. I don't recall why, flooding, maintenance, something like that, but Sofia was really upset. I tried to calm her down, suggesting we could hike one of the many other trails the forest offered. She wasn't having it, though, insisting that the closed trail was the best and the others didn't compare. How one trail could be vastly superior to another, I couldn't say, but she was adamant, and I'd learned not to argue with her over such things. I asked her what she wanted to do instead, and she suggested we hike the closed trail anyway. As I said, I was a bit rebellious back then, and so was she, so I was on board with her idea. We'd come all this way, and no rule was going to stop us. She gave me a look, and that was all it took. We made sure no one was around, slipped past the barriers, and started up the trail, laughing like a couple of fools. At first, it was exactly what we wanted, better even. It felt like we had the entire forest to ourselves, which was especially thrilling given how popular this trail normally was. Imagine visiting a world-famous natural site with no one else around. That kind of exclusivity is rare. We hiked for a while, passing small waterfalls and admiring the forest's beauty, and yes, we were drinking not excessively, just enough to feel a good buzz. It was genuinely fun, but then out of nowhere, Sofia screamed and jumped back, nearly knocking me over. That put me on high alert, though I didn't know what had scared her. I looked around frantically until I saw it. A bit further down the path was what looked like a freshly decapitated mongoose. Let me repeat, a mongoose, a large one, and its head was completely gone. I told Sofia to stay put and approach the carcass alone, hoping it was perhaps a stuffed animal. It wasn't. I inspected it without getting too close and confirmed my initial thought. Its head was cleanly sliced off, the cut too precise to be anything but a knife wound, which was deeply disturbing. Worse, the body hadn't started to smell, meaning it likely hadn't been there long. Sofia was shaking. I was mostly shocked. I tried to reassure her with something foolish about how crime in a national forest was unlikely, though I couldn't explain it myself. I put my arm around her and guided her past the body, trying to shield it from her view. All I could think about was putting distance between us and that poor, lifeless creature. We walked in silence for a while, and even though we'd moved away from the mongoose, I could tell the moment was ruined. The adrenaline had killed my buzz and my good mood. As bad as I felt, I could see Sofia was far more shaken, and I doubted she was enjoying herself at all. She said she wanted to stick to our plan of hiking the whole trail to the other side, but it was clear she didn't want to be in that forest anymore, and I couldn't blame her. As we walked, I couldn't stop trying to make sense of what we'd found. It didn't add up. I wasn't familiar with the hunting laws there, but I couldn't imagine hunting in a national forest so close to a pedestrian trail was legal. Yet, that was the only explanation I could think of. Why they'd left the mongoose's body to rot was beyond me, but there was no other rational explanation. Perhaps it was a hunter who, like us, seized the chance to have that part of the forest to himself. I didn't know. Sophia and I hiked another mile or so, with me trying to cheer her up, but nothing worked. Eventually, she admitted she wasn't feeling well and wanted to turn back. I didn't argue, though I dreaded passing that spot again, mainly because I wasn't sure how it would affect her, and I just wanted her to feel safe. We retraced our steps, and I could tell we were nearing the spot where the mongoose had been. I told Sophia to keep her head down so she wouldn't see, and she did. I braced myself as we rounded the final bend, but when the spot came into view, the mongoose was gone. Someone had moved it. My heart started racing, and I immediately scanned the nearby trees, terrified someone was hiding among them. I wasn't prepared for what came next. Instead of seeing a person, I noticed something hanging from a tree, a mongoose strung up with twine, its paws tied together. A sickly green liquid dripped from its body, which hadn't been there before, and it was slowly rotating in the wind. I couldn't help but curse aloud, causing Sophia to open her eyes. As soon as she saw it, she let out a blood-curdling scream of pure terror. Before she could freeze, I grabbed her wrist and told her to run. We sprinted down the trail, trying not to trip over each other. I let her go ahead of me, constantly looking over my shoulder, half expecting someone to be following us. Then, a deafening scream rang out from somewhere behind us, a woman's scream, absolutely terrifying, like someone being attacked. I felt Sophia's body jolt mid-stride, and for a moment, I thought she'd collapse. She let out a panicked sob and tried to push herself harder, but she was already out of breath. I kept my grip on her wrist, practically dragging her as she slowed. We couldn't stop. My chest was burning, but we had to keep moving. Eventually, Sophia could barely run, so we slowed to a fast walk. I turned around completely, walking backward, keeping my eyes locked on the trail behind us. I was bracing for a fight. Something had strung up that mongoose. Something had caused that scream. I was certain we'd see something charging toward us any second, but nothing happened. The trailhead finally came into view, and for a brief moment, I thought we were safe. But then I saw someone standing near the barricades, watching us, a park worker, arms crossed, clearly angry. As soon as we slipped past the barricades, he started yelling about breaking the rules, saying he was kicking us out and banning us for life. But then he got a good look at Sophia, who was sobbing and physically exhausted. I told him everything, leaving no detail out. He took it seriously and said we needed to come with him. We were taken to a small ranger station near the parking lot where a supervisor was waiting. I had to recount the story again, then again when they called the police. Sophia didn't say a word. Eventually her mother arrived and we left, still shaken. I never heard what the authorities found or if they even investigated. Sophia's family might have heard something, but we broke up the following summer and lost contact, so I wouldn't know. I haven't thought about this in a long time, but it's still just as unsettling as it was then. The worst part was that scream, because we never saw anyone else on that trail, and I have no idea who it belonged to. I'd consider myself a laid-back guy, and I'd say the same about most of my mates. This happened last year, so I'll dive right in. Spring break was supposed to be just me and my friends, Ethan, Lily, and Sophia, camping on a secluded beach in Alabama. No crowds, just stars and waves. We got there late, later than planned, parked in the closest lot, and started walking toward the beach. The place was eerily quiet, no other campers, no fishermen, just empty sand stretching for miles. According to Sophia, who knew the area, locals sometimes used that part of the beach for overnight fishing. But that night, it was deserted. It wasn't fully dark yet, but the sun was setting, so we needed to set up camp quickly. Ethan and I started pitching the tents. Since I had driven, I brought my dog, Max, a Doberman who loved the sand, and we all enjoyed watching him run and roll around. At one point, Lily pointed out a car in the distance, saying it had driven by twice already. I turned, and an old, beat-up SUV slowly rolled past on the narrow access road parallel to the dunes. The road was little more than a strip of packed sand, just wide enough for one car, with the beach on one side and a line of shrubs on the other. You couldn't see the main roads from where we were. The car drove by and disappeared down the road. The four of us shrugged it off and went back to setting up. By the time we finished, we decided to crack open a few beers and chat in a circle. The girls drank seltzers instead, which we teased them about. It was almost fully dark by then. I can't recall who noticed it first, but that car was back, and this time it stopped parallel to us. The driver's door opened, and a man got out. I could tell it was a man because he was tall, though I couldn't make out his face. He started walking toward us and the girls got nervous. Ethan and I told them not to worry, and we got up to intercept him before he reached our campsite. Max was already on high alert, so I told him to come with us. As we got closer, I noticed he was walking oddly with a slight limp, and he stumbled a few times. When we were close enough, Ethan said, "How's it going, mate?" trying to keep things light. The guy didn't waste time. He immediately said, "You're on my property," slurring his words a bit, and I figured he was drunk. I told him we thought the beach was public land. It's highly unlikely some random person owned the beach, and there were no private signs. After I said that, he didn't respond. Instead, he pulled out a knife. Max started growling in response to the man's body language, which should have scared him off, given how intimidating Dobermans look, but he didn't budge. Instead, he started running toward us with the knife outstretched. Max charged and jumped, attacking the arm holding the knife, causing the man to fall. I yelled no at the top of my lungs, not wanting Max to get stabbed, but somehow Max got the guy to drop the knife. The man screamed in pain as Max bit his arm. I whistled for Max to get off, and he listened, running back to my side, but keeping his eyes on the guy who was writhing on the ground. Eventually, the man got up and ran back to his car. Ethan and I ran back to the girls, telling them everything. By the time we finished, the sub had driven off. The girls wanted to pack up and carry everything back to the car, but I was nervous about that plan. That guy was unhinged. There was no telling what he'd do, and I wasn't keen on walking in the dark with my hands full. Sophia made a good point, though, saying he might return with a gun. I told Lily to call the police and tell them where we were and what happened. Once the police were nearby, the four of us started walking to the parking lot with our stuff. Max was on high alert, and honestly, he was the only reason I felt remotely safe. I noticed lights ahead near my car and felt relieved. An officer stepped out to take our statements, but I wasn't ready for what happened next. He quickly pointed out that my car's tires were slashed. I was horrified. The officer unholstered his weapon and told me to unlock the car, which I did. He checked the trunk, but thankfully it was a false alarm. The officer was kind enough to help with my tire situation. Thank goodness we brought Max that night. That guy was likely a drunken lunatic. It could have been a quadruple murder if he'd had his way. Finding a secluded spot to hang out is great, but it obviously comes with risks. It was spring break 2023. My friend Emma and I booked a trip to Miami for a weekend. It was both our first times in Miami, and we were both 22. We stayed at a full house rental in Wynwood, about a 20-minute Uber from the beach. We arrived late on Thursday, so we just went to some nearby bars that first night, which was fun. The next day, we Ubered to Miami Beach for a beach day, bringing towels from the rental and lounging for hours. Several groups of guys approached us, and we brushed them off, but one guy who approached me specifically stood out. He had a charming accent, a friendly, forward personality, and was honestly handsome from head to toe. He introduced himself as Liam, asked about our plans for the night, and requested my number. I gave it to him and he walked off down the beach. He didn't seem to be with anyone, and we watched to see if he'd try to get more numbers, but he didn't, just walked away, looking at his phone, and eventually left the beach toward the street. Emma was a bit jealous that he paid more attention to me, I could tell. Later that day, after the beach and some bars, we left Miami Beach because it was a bit too wild for us, especially during spring break. We returned to the rental with drinks and snacks from a nearby store, drinking in the backyard by the pool while listening to music on Emma's speaker and planning our night. I texted Liam asking what he was doing, and he responded quickly, saying he and his friend had no plans yet and suggested the four of us go out in Wynwood. Emma jokingly asked if the friend was cute, but I wasn't going to ask that. We planned for Liam and his friend to pregame with us at the rental. They arrived around 8. The friend, Noah, was surprisingly good looking too, and Emma was pleasantly surprised. They brought their own drinks, left them on the kitchen counter, and we drank in the yard for about an hour. They seemed normal, and everything was going well. We eventually walked to a nearby bar, also in Wynwood. Admittedly, Emma and I were already drunk, and Noah and Liam kept buying rounds of shots. Things got blurry fast. I wouldn't say I blacked out, but parts of my memory became foggy. Eventually, Emma and Noah went to another side of the bar, presumably to hook up, so I was alone with Liam for a while. I had to use the bathroom, and before I left, I remember him asking what I wanted for my next drink. I replied, "Tequila soda." When I returned, I couldn't believe what I saw. Liam was hovering over the corner of the bar, clearly doing something suspicious. I moved to get a better angle and saw he had 2 drinks in front of him, but he was hunched over them as if tampering with mine. I may have been drunk, but that was enough for my instincts to kick in. I walked away without him noticing, heading to the other side of the bar to find Emma, but she and Noah were gone. I rushed out of the bar and tried calling her repeatedly, but she didn't answer. Around this time, Liam texted asking where I'd gone. I ignored it. I texted Emma multiple times, asking what happened and where she was, then mentioned I thought Liam was trying to roofie me and that we should get away from these guys. I started walking back to the Airbnb. Emma texted back, asking why I thought he was roofing me. I explained he was hovering over my drink, doing something to it. She replied, maybe he was just on his phone. I tried calling again, but she didn't pick up, texting instead to say she was still with Noah and to just text. I told her I'd already left and wasn't going back, suggesting she meet me at the Airbnb. She said she'd be back soon. When I got to the Airbnb, I let myself in with the code. The door automatically locked after 10 seconds, as did the back door. I sat there very drunk, alone, worried about Emma, but also wondering if I was overthinking the roofie thing. Maybe he was just on his phone. Either way, it was too late now. Surprisingly, Liam never texted or called again. Then I heard the back door's knob jiggle, followed by the sound of the code locks buttons and a failed attempt noise. I got a text from Emma's number saying to open the back door. I went to the door and called her name through it, but there was no answer. I tried calling her phone, but she didn't pick up. Another text came saying, "Hurry, open the door. He's coming." I started freaking out. I yelled through the door, "Hama, you're scaring me." There was no peephole or windows to check if it was really her. I begged her to answer, but she didn't. There was a peephole at the front door, so I rushed there and looked out. I felt sick, terrified for my life, because I saw what looked like Liam hiding to the side of the front door. A million thoughts raced through my mind. If Emma was running from Liam, I was still too scared to open the back door without her confirming it was her. I texted her that I was calling 911 right now. She didn't respond. I called 911 and explained, and while on the phone, I checked the peephole again. Liam was gone. When the police arrived, I let them in. Within 5 minutes, one asked if my friend was blonde, and I said yes. He said another officer had her in a squad car and was bringing her there. I was so relieved but also horrified when Emma arrived in a second police car. She'd been crying and was very drunk. To the best of her ability, she explained that her phone had been stolen and she'd been wandering the streets for an hour until someone helped her call the police. All the texts from her number weren't from her, they were from Noah or whatever his real name was. We also found her phone thrown in the backyard pool. They clearly fled when I mentioned the police. We had to file a police report, giving every detail as specifically as possible. The police said they'd get surveillance footage from the bar. We also contacted the Airbnb host, canceled our stay, and went elsewhere. It was a nightmarish night, and the rest of our trip was ruined. It took a week before the police followed up, only to confirm that the name Liam gave didn't match the phone records, which I'd already figured out. He was using another stolen phone. After that, I never heard from the police again, which is sickening given how little priority they gave this, even with clear evidence. I have no interest in returning to Miami after this horrific experience. I could have been killed. My name is Eliza. My friend Nora and I had been looking forward to spring break for weeks. We were two broke college juniors desperate for a change of scenery, but couldn't afford a trip to Mexico or Hawaii, so we were limited to somewhere in the continental use, preferably nearby. When we found a cheap Airbnb near Charleston's historic district, we booked it immediately. 5 nights of food, bars, and exploring felt like just what we needed. Plus, it was my first spring break over 21, so I wouldn't have to stress about which places might take my fake ed. By the third night, we'd settled into a routine sightseeing during the day, hopping between restaurants and bars in the evening. Neither Nora nor I are heavy drinkers, so we were more about enjoying what the city offered. That evening, we ended up at a small seafood spot we'd found online, fried shrimp, hush puppies, sweet tea, that kind of vibe. It felt like a hidden gem, and I was impressed Nora had sifted through the touristy stuff to find something authentic. The good vibe didn't last, though. Halfway through our late lunch, my phone buzzed. It was a number I didn't recognize, with a message that just said, "A." I stared at it for a moment before showing Nora, asking if she knew the number. She didn't. I figured it was a scam or a wrong number, but scam texts usually say more than A. I texted back, "Who is this?" and went back to eating. Nora and I were laughing about something silly when another text from the same number came through. "Look outside." That made me pause. I glanced toward the window by our table, expecting to see someone waving or joking, maybe a friend from school who'd coincidentally come to Charleston. But there was nothing, just the street with people walking by as usual. I told Nora someone was messing with me, and she agreed it was probably a prank. I laughed, but it creeped me out. None of my friends were the type to do that, though I supposed it could have been some guy who'd hit on me and was bored. Up to that point, it still felt harmless. But a few minutes later, another message came. Just one word, Eliza, that stopped me cold. If they knew my name, it wasn't a wrong number or likely a scam. I gasped and showed Nora, who reminded me of something I'd forgotten on our first day in Charleston. We'd entered a giveaway at a local cafe for a free meal, giving our names, numbers, and a few other details. It had slipped my mind, but once Nora mentioned it, it clicked. I hadn't given my number to anyone else in Charleston, so it made sense. I told Nora whoever was texting me probably had her number too, and we freaked each other out a bit. Dinner wasn't fun after that. I felt too exposed. We paid and decided to shake it off at a rooftop bar across town. The bar was packed, attracting a younger crowd, so it was an easy choice. After a few drinks, I was starting to relax, and Nora and I were enjoying ourselves again. But, of course, that didn't last. I got another message from that number, and this one was much worse. "That's a nice red jacket." I froze. I was wearing a red jacket? One of the only people there in red. I looked around frantically, but it was pointless. The place was crowded with people laughing and drinking, and no one was obviously watching me. I showed Nora, and she said we should leave. We made our way back to the Airbnb as cautiously as possible, glancing behind us to ensure we weren't followed. We weren't. Once inside, I bolted the door and double-checked every lock. We shut the curtains and locked all windows, trying to convince ourselves we were overreacting. An hour later, we got hungry but didn't want to leave. We ordered Uber Eats from a random burger place a few blocks away. I always set my Uber Eats to leave at door after a bad experience with a delivery driver I'd rather not discuss. The estimated wait was 50 minutes, which felt like forever. We distracted ourselves with a dumb reality show, trying to shake off the earlier paranoia, and for a while it worked. Then there was a knock at the door. I checked my phone and saw an Uber Eats notification saying the driver was arriving, but I was confused. Normally, they'd send a photo when the food was dropped off, so why had the driver knocked? I looked at Nora, who seemed equally puzzled. I checked the peephole and saw a bulky guy in a hoodie holding our food bag, looking like a typical Uber Eats driver. I watched, expecting him to set the food down and leave, but he just stood there. After a bit, he knocked again and said, "Uber Eats for Eliza." I thanked him and said he could leave it there, but he didn't move. After a long pause, he said I needed to come out and sign something quick. That wasn't right. I exchanged a glance with Nora. Something was very wrong. She immediately pulled out her phone and dialed 911, mouthing, "just in case." I wasn't going to argue. Looking back, speaking to that guy was probably a mistake. After that, he started knocking more aggressively, saying he had other deliveries and just needed a quick signature. I knew that was nonsense. When I didn't respond, he started jiggling the doorknob. When it didn't budge, he banged on the door, shouting my name. I thought he'd kick the door down, and I doubted Nora, and I could have fended him off. But then I heard a siren in the distance, and the banging stopped. I heard the food bag drop to the porch, followed by rapid footsteps running away. There was commotion in our yard, officers yelling, sirens blaring. Nora and I rushed to a window just in time to see two officers tackling the guy in the hoodie a few houses over. We didn't dare go outside, but watched as they cuffed him and put him in a police car. The officers came to our house, and we told them everything, including the texts. By some miracle, one officer had been patrolling 2 blocks away when Nora called, explaining their quick arrival. Thankfully, we were in a busy area. They took our statements and said we'd hear from them soon. Our cafe theory was spot on. He worked there, had taken photos of the giveaway forms, and had been following us since that afternoon, likely because we'd noted we were just visiting for spring break, making us easy targets. The police's theory was that he followed us home from the bar and waited outside. When the Uber Eats driver arrived, he likely convinced him to hand over the food, maybe pretending to be my boyfriend. The guy also had a criminal record, which made it even scarier. We were dealing with someone with a violent history. The rest of the trip was awful, and when it was time to leave Charleston, I was relieved. I still don't know what his plan was. Maybe he thought if we opened the door, he could force his way in and do who knows what. I try not to think about what would have happened if Nora hadn't called the police when she did, or if they hadn't arrived in time.